20 years into her marriage, Catherine sat alone at a five-star restaurant, 7 months along in her pregnancy, waiting for a husband who would never arrive. What he had no idea about was that the quiet housewife he had been dismissing for years secretly ran a tech empire worth more than $800 million. And that evening, she was finished with the pretending. This is a story about betrayal, about getting even, and about the most powerful kind of comeback imaginable. Stay with me, because every twist in this tale will make you rethink who is truly holding the reins. And the ending. You will not see it coming. If you love stories where justice gets served and power finds its rightful owner, go ahead and hit that like button. Leave your thoughts down in the comments, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe so you never miss the next extraordinary story. Mrs. Sterling, your husband called to say he will be late again. Catherine Sterling looked up from her phone, meeting the sympathetic gaze of the maitre d' at Sharon. The man's voice carried that particular tone reserved for wives who found themselves waiting alone at anniversary dinners. A blend of pity and professional discretion that Catherine had encountered far too many times before. Henri Dubois had worked at that establishment for 15 years, and he had watched Catherine sit at that very same table, waiting for Brandon, more times than either of them cared to acknowledge. "Thank you, Henri," Catherine said, her hand drifting instinctively to her 7-month belly. The baby kicked, as though sensing her mother's quiet disappointment. "I will wait a little longer." Classical piano music drifted softly through the restaurant, a melancholy Chopin piece that felt almost too perfectly suited to the moment. Around her, the gentle clink of crystal glasses and the low murmur of couples who had actually kept their reservations created a kind of symphony, a reminder of ordinary relationships. The kind where partners showed up for each other, where anniversaries carried real meaning beyond just another evening to work late. 20 years. Catherine turned the number over in her mind as she sipped her sparkling water, the bubbles tickling her nose. 20 years of marriage to Brandon Sterling, and she could not remember the last anniversary he had been on time for. Actually, that was not entirely true. She could remember. It was their 5th anniversary, back when Sterling Industries was still fighting to survive. Back when Brandon needed her emotional support and the mysterious infusions of cash that kept appearing precisely when the company needed them most. The candle on her table flickered, casting shadows across the empty place setting opposite her. The waiter had discreetly cleared the second setting after the first hour, but Catherine had asked him to put it back. Hope, she supposed, was the last thing to die in a marriage. Her phone vibrated against the white tablecloth. Brandon's name lit up the screen, and for a moment, Catherine considered not answering. But 20 years of habit won out. "Catherine," his voice was sharp, impatient. The same tone he reserved for junior executives who disappointed him, or vendors who failed to deliver on schedule. "Listen, something came up at the office. Big merger discussion with the Tokyo branch, you understand?" In the background, Catherine heard it. Feminine laughter, light and high-pitched, like champagne flutes touching. Then music, but not the kind that played in offices. This was club music, a deep bass thumping through the phone. She caught the unmistakable pop of a champagne cork, followed by more of that same bright laughter. "Of course, Brandon," she replied, keeping her voice measured, composed, masking the exhaustion that had settled into her bones like something heavy. 20 years of practice had made her an expert at concealing how she truly felt. "The merger is important." "Good. Don't wait up." He ended the call without saying goodbye, without mentioning their anniversary, without asking about the baby, without even attempting to care anymore. A server approached, carrying a dessert plate, a chocolate soufflé crowned with a delicate sugar sculpture, carefully shaped to look like 2 swans with their necks intertwined. "Compliments of the house, Mrs. Sterling, for your special day." Catherine smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. Her eyes, Brandon used to say, were like melted chocolate, warm and welcoming. Now they were simply tired. "How thoughtful. Please thank the chef for me." As she sat there, surrounded by couples celebrating their own milestones, her phone buzzed with a notification from social media. Brandon's executive assistant, Jennifer, had tagged him in a photo. Jennifer was young, driven, and entirely unaware that her boss's wife followed her Instagram account under a different name. Catherine knew she should not look, but her finger moved on its own, pulled by that same morbid curiosity that draws people to slow down near accidents. There was her millionaire husband, though she was already beginning to think of him as her soon-to-be former husband, with his arms wrapped around a young model named Scarlett Rose. The timestamp read 15 minutes ago. The location was Eclipse, Manhattan's most exclusive nightclub, where the membership alone cost more than most people earned in a year. In the photograph, Brandon's hand rested low on Scarlett's back, too low for a business meeting, too familiar for a casual acquaintance. Scarlett was everything Catherine was not. 23 years old, blonde, thin in the way that suggested she survived on green juice and recklessness, dressed in something that cost more than most people's monthly rent and left very little to the imagination. Catherine drew a long, measured breath, a technique she had picked up in the prenatal yoga classes she attended alone, while Brandon claimed to be in board meetings. She studied the photo closely. Behind Brandon and Scarlett, she could make out other Sterling Industries executives, all raising glasses in what looked like a celebration. The Tokyo merger, apparently, required champagne and models. The waiter returned, hovering with quiet discretion. Would Madame care for anything else? Just the check, please, Catherine said, her voice steady despite the tremor moving through her chest. As she signed the credit card receipt, Brandon's card, which would soon be deactivated if she had any say in it, Catherine made a quiet mental note to call her attorney in the morning. Not Brandon's lawyer, not the family lawyer who managed their estate planning, her lawyer. The one Brandon did not know existed, just as he did not know about so many other things. Henri appeared with her coat, a cashmere wrap Brandon had given her for Christmas 5 years ago, back when he still bothered with gifts chosen by him rather than delegated to his assistant. Mrs. Sterling, Henri said quietly as he helped her into it. If I may say so, you deserve better. Catherine met his eyes, a little surprised by the departure from professional distance. Henri had a daughter around her age, she remembered. He had mentioned it once. Thank you, Henri, she said simply. I am beginning to believe you are right. As she stepped out into the rainy Manhattan evening, her driver holding an umbrella above her head, Catherine Sterling made a mental note to contact Patricia Morrison first thing in the morning. Patricia was the finest divorce attorney in New York and, more importantly, she specialized in high-net-worth divorces involving spouses with hidden assets. Because while Brandon believed he was married to a former secretary who ought to be grateful for his achievements, the truth was far more complicated. Rain beat against the car windows as her driver moved through Manhattan traffic. Catherine rested her hand on her belly, feeling the baby shift beneath her palm. It is just you and me now, little one, she whispered. But do not worry. Mommy has been preparing for this day for a very long time. The coffee maker gurgled in the pristine kitchen of their Manhattan penthouse, a $15 million property Brandon loved to brag about at dinner parties. Catherine sat at the breakfast bar, her laptop open to spreadsheets Brandon never knew she could read. The morning news played softly on the television, a segment about tech stocks that might have caught her interest under different circumstances if she had not already been calculating the exact worth of her hidden empire. The spreadsheets told a story Brandon had never bothered to read. Chen Technologies. She had kept her mother's maiden name for the company, though Brandon had never thought to ask about her mother's family, beyond confirming early on that they could not contribute to the wedding expenses. The company had grown to a valuation of $800 million, with subsidiaries in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and biotech. All of it built while Brandon assumed she spent her days at charity luncheons and spa appointments. The private elevator chimed, its tone designed to be pleasant rather than jarring. Brandon walked in still wearing the previous day's Armani suit, his silver hair slightly disheveled, carrying a scent that was not hers. The perfume was expensive. She recognized it as Tom Ford's Lost Cherry, around $500 a bottle. Scarlett had refined taste, apparently. Catherine, he said, not meeting her eyes as he poured himself coffee from the machine that cost more than most people's cars. We need to talk about our arrangement. She closed her laptop slowly and deliberately, folding her hands over her pregnant belly. The baby was quiet that morning, as though sensing the tension in the room. Our arrangement. Is that what we are calling our marriage now? Brandon's jaw tightened. He disliked being questioned by her, especially in that calm, measured tone that made him feel like he was being studied under a microscope. It was the same tone she had used when she suggested he look at certain tech startups, suggestions he had dismissed with a laugh until his golf partners made identical recommendations months later, long after Catherine had already secured her own positions through shell companies. Don't be dramatic, he said, switching to the CEO voice that had reportedly made junior executives cry behind closed doors. You know what I mean. This situation isn't working anymore. A man in my position needs a certain kind of partner. And what kind would that be, Brandon? Catherine asked, watching him fidget with his platinum wedding band, the one she had saved for 6 months to buy him when they were young and poor and supposedly in love. Back when they lived in a cramped Queens apartment, when she worked as a secretary by day and coded late into the night, laying the foundation for what would eventually become her empire, while Brandon attended business school on loans she had helped him obtain. Someone who understands the demands of the business world, he said, his voice slipping into the patronizing register he used with people he considered beneath him, which was nearly everyone. Someone who can keep up with the social expectations of being married to a CEO. Someone who can be an asset rather than a liability. Catherine nearly laughed. If only he understood that she had been the asset all along. That every major achievement Sterling Industries had recorded over the past 20 years had been quietly orchestrated by her, steered through careful market strategy and calculated investments that Brandon had always mistaken for fortunate coincidences. We've grown apart, Catherine, he continued, warming to his rehearsed script. You must see that. You've let yourself go, he said, gesturing vaguely at her pregnant belly, as though their child were evidence of her shortcomings rather than a symbol of what they had once committed to together. You don't understand what it takes to maintain my image. When did you last come to a corporate event looking like you belonged on my arm? 3 weeks ago, Catherine replied evenly. The Sterling Industries charity gala, I wore the Oscar de la Renta gown. The one you said made me look like I was trying too hard. I spoke with the Japanese investors about their interest in quantum computing applications. Though you introduced me to the room as your wife who dabbles in reading about tech, Brandon's face reddened. He had not expected her to recall specifics. He certainly had not expected her to use his own words against him. That is exactly what I mean. You're passive-aggressive, Catherine. It's exhausting. I notice many things, she replied, taking a sip of her decaf tea, a special blend she had imported from Japan that cost $200 a pound. Brandon had complained about the expense once, until she told him it came from the grocery store. Including the photos from Eclipse last night, Scarlet Rose seems quite understanding of your position. Brandon's color shifted from flush to pale within seconds. He had not expected her to already know. 20 years of marriage had made him careless, had led him to assume that Catherine was too naive, too trusting, too reliant on him to pay close attention to what he was doing. That is a business relationship, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is that what we are calling it? Catherine echoed his earlier phrasing back at him, a technique she had picked up at a negotiation seminar she had attended while Brandon believed she was at book club. How long has this business relationship been going on? 3 months? 6? Brandon stayed quiet for a moment, visibly calculating, trying to determine how much she already knew, how much he could reasonably deny. Finally, his shoulders dropped slightly. 8 months. The admission hung between them like something physical. 8 months. Catherine had been pregnant for 7, which meant he had started the affair while they were supposedly trying to conceive this baby. While he had held her hand at the fertility clinic and promised they were facing this together. 8 months, Catherine repeated, her hand resting gently on her belly. I see. This is exactly what I mean, Brandon said, anger rushing back to fill the space left by his brief vulnerability. You're passive-aggressive, Catherine. You manipulate every conversation. You've let yourself go. You don't understand what it takes to run a company like Sterling Industries. You sit here in this penthouse I pay for, living off my success, contributing nothing. Catherine rose slowly, her movements deliberate despite her advanced pregnancy. At 7 months, she moved with the careful grace of someone carrying something precious, which she was. Perhaps you are right, Brandon. Things do need to change. He blinked, thrown off balance by how easily she agreed. In 20 years of marriage, Catherine had never yielded this quickly, especially not on something this significant. Typically, she resisted quietly but persistently, wearing him down with logic and quiet arguments until he either conceded or left the room in frustration. Good, he said, suspicious but trying to hold on to his composure. I will have my lawyer contact yours. We can handle this cleanly. The prenup is straightforward. Yes, Catherine said, already walking toward the bedroom they had shared for 2 decades. Let's absolutely involve the lawyers. Patricia Morrison comes highly recommended. You have already found a lawyer? Brandon's voice cracked slightly. Catherine paused in the doorway without turning back. 8 months ago, Brandon. You just told me how long. As she disappeared into the bedroom, Brandon stood alone in the kitchen, suddenly unsure about who had really been steering that conversation. His phone buzzed. Scarlett asking about the divorce timeline, wondering when she could begin posting photos of them publicly, mapping out a future she intended to fund with his money. He smiled, reassuring himself. Catherine was a housewife with no resources of her own. The prenuptial agreement he had insisted on 20 years ago would guarantee she walked away with nothing. She had been a secretary earning $25,000 a year when they met. No family wealth, no trust fund, no fallback. She needed him. In the bedroom, Catherine reached for her secure phone, the one registered to her company rather than to Mrs. Brandon Sterling. She sent a single message to David Park, her assistant at the company Brandon did not know existed. It is time to execute Project Renaissance. David's reply came back almost immediately. All assets prepared for revelation. Legal team on standby. Media contacts ready. Your empire awaits your command. Catherine smiled. The first genuine smile she had felt in months. How many women have heard these same words from their millionaire husbands? She thought as she began packing. How many had been told they were being exchanged for a newer version, like a vehicle that had lost its value? How many had been told they contributed nothing, all while silently holding everything together from underneath? She pulled out the designer luggage Brandon had given her for their 10th anniversary, back when he still remembered to mark the occasion, and began filling it with carefully selected things. Not the flashy jewelry he had bought her to signal his wealth, but the practical items, documents, hard drives, photographs of her parents he had never once asked about. Her phone rang. Patricia Morrison's name appeared on the screen. Catherine. Patricia's voice was warm but grounded in steel. David told me you are ready to proceed. He asked for a divorce this morning, Catherine confirmed. Admitted to an 8-month affair, on recording. I hope. Everything in our penthouse is recorded, Catherine said. The security system Brandon insisted on installing. He just never thought to ask who actually controlled the data. Patricia laughed. This is why you are my favorite client. 20 years of preparation for this moment. Most women do not plan this far in advance. Most women trust their husbands, Catherine replied, folding a simple black dress, the one she had worn to her father's funeral, the one Brandon had said made her look poor. I stopped trusting Brandon the day he made me sign that prenup without allowing me to have an attorney review it. That was the day I understood I needed my own empire. Speaking of which, the financial forensics team has found something significant in Sterling Industries records. Catherine paused mid-fold. Oh? Brandon has been using algorithms to drive his trading decisions. Very advanced algorithms. The kind that predict market behavior with remarkable precision. The kind that would require a genius-level grasp of both financial markets and coding to develop. Imagine that, Catherine said dryly. The interesting part is that these algorithms match exactly the ones registered to Chen Technologies' intellectual property portfolio. The portfolio you have been building for 20 years. He has been stealing from me. It was not a question. For approximately 10 years, generating hundreds of millions in profits he has claimed as the product of his own business insight. Catherine, this is not simply a divorce matter. This is corporate theft on a massive scale. Catherine sat down on the edge of the bed, one hand resting on her belly as the baby shifted. Patricia, I want you to document everything, but do not file anything yet. Let Brandon believe he is the one winning for now. The prenup he is so proud of contains an infidelity clause he almost certainly forgot about. Infidelity during pregnancy voids the entire agreement. You have known about that clause for 20 years, haven't you? I wrote it, Catherine admitted. Brandon was so focused on making sure I could not claim any of his future earnings that he did not read the fine print about what would invalidate the agreement. His lawyer was fresh out of law school and eager to please. I may have suggested some language that appeared to favor Brandon, but was actually designed to protect me. Brilliant. When do you want to reveal Chen Technologies? Catherine glanced around the bedroom, at the designer wardrobe Brandon had assembled for her, the jewelry purchased to mark her as his, the life she had been performing while quietly building something real in the background. Soon, she said. But first, Let him show the world exactly who he is. Let him parade Scarlett around in public. Let him dismiss me to anyone who will listen. Let him believe he has won. The higher he builds his house of cards, the more spectacular the collapse will be. The conference room at Patterson Morrison and Associates carried the scent of leather and old money, its floor-to-ceiling windows opening out over Central Park. The law firm occupied the entire 40th floor of a building that predated most of Manhattan's modern skyline. Its prestige measured not in contemporary amenities, but in the framed photographs of distinguished clients lining the walls, senators, celebrities, more than a handful of billionaires who had required discreet representation during complicated separations. Brandon sat across from Catherine, his attorney, a sharp-suited Wall Street type by the name of Marcus Fitzgerald, rearranging papers with aggressive efficiency. Marcus embodied everything Brandon valued in legal counsel: relentless, expensive, and entirely without scruples. His watch caught the overhead light as he organized the documents, a quiet display of status that Brandon found reassuring. "Let's make this quick," Marcus said, his clipped delivery cutting off any attempt at pleasantries. "My client is a busy man. The prenuptial agreement from 20 years ago is clear. In the event of divorce, Mrs. Sterling receives only what she brought into the marriage." Patricia Morrison, Catherine's attorney, was everything Marcus was not. Warm in tone with iron running beneath every word. Patient in a way that concealed strategic brilliance. She adjusted her reading glasses, a simple pair that probably cost more than most people earned in a month, and lifted the prenuptial agreement. Patricia had practiced law for 30 years. She had represented the wives of 3 Supreme Court justices and had never lost a case involving hidden assets. Which was nothing, Brandon added, his phone buzzing persistently with messages from Scarlett. He made no effort to conceal the screen lighting up with phrases like, "When can we go public, baby?" And "the Cartier bracelet is perfect." "Catherine was a secretary when we met," Brandon continued, his voice thick with condescension. "I have been more than generous over the years. The clothes, the jewelry, the lifestyle, all of it provided by me. She has lived like a queen on the back of my success." Catherine sat quietly, hands folded over her belly, watching Brandon's certainty the way a scientist observes a specimen. She wore a simple black dress, nothing elaborate. The kind of outfit that whispers rather than announces itself. Brandon had always misjudged the power of a whisper. Brandon's phone rang. He glanced at it, then at the room. "I need to take this. It's about the Tokyo merger." "By all means," Patricia said pleasantly. "We will wait." Brandon stepped into the hallway, his voice carrying clearly through the glass doors. "Scarlett, baby, I told you I am in the lawyer's office. Yes, the divorce will be final soon. Yes, you can start looking at wedding venues." Marcus shifted in his seat. Even he appeared to recognize that his client's lack of discretion was not helping their position. When Brandon returned, Patricia had spread several documents across the table. "Mr. Sterling, I have been reviewing this prenuptial agreement, and there is a rather interesting clause on page 18. Marcus seized the document, scanning with the rapid precision that reportedly justified his $2,000 hourly rate. "What clause?" "This is a standard agreement from 20 years ago." "Standard, perhaps," Patricia said, her tone maintaining that precise balance of professional courtesy and quiet menace. "But there is an invalidation clause, Section 18R 3.2, she read aloud. "In the event of infidelity during pregnancy, resulting in abandonment of marital duties, the prenuptial agreement becomes void." The room went silent, broken only by the buzz of Brandon's phone against the conference table. Another message from Scarlett, the preview showing a photograph of wedding gowns. "That is ridiculous," Brandon erupted, his face darkening. "Abandonment? I am sitting right here. I have not abandoned anything." "At your 20th anniversary dinner last night?" Patricia inquired mildly. "Or during the 12 prenatal appointments you have not attended? The 3 ultrasounds you missed? The birthing class you described as unnecessary because, and I quote, that is what doctors are for?" She pulled up a tablet and swiped through a series of documents. "We have documentation of your 8-month relationship with Miss Rose, including credit card records showing $5,000 at Tiffany's last month, $12,000 at Bergdorf Goodman last week, and a private jet to Miami for a weekend during which you informed your wife you were attending a conference in Boston." Marcus was now scrambling through the papers, his composure beginning to fracture. This is, this is circumstantial. We also have hotel records, Patricia continued, with the same unruffled calm. The Four Seasons penthouse suite, billed to Sterling Industries as client entertainment, though I find myself curious which client required champagne, strawberries, and a couple's massage. She swiped to the next screen. And social media posts in which Miss Rose refers to you as her future husband, dating back to when Mrs. Sterling was only 1 month into her pregnancy. This one is particularly compelling. A photograph of Miss Rose wearing a necklace engraved with the initials BS Forever. I assume BS stands for Brandon Sterling, rather than the more obvious interpretation. Brandon's phone rang again, Scarlett this time. He declined the call, but the preview of her follow-up message was visible to the room. Did you get rid of her yet? Baby, the wedding planner needs a deposit. She gets nothing. Brandon slammed his palm on the table, rattling the coffee cups and sending Marcus's pen rolling to the floor. She brought nothing into this marriage. She contributed nothing. I built my empire while she sat at home, spending my money. Catherine spoke for the first time since the meeting had begun. Her voice was calm and precise. We will see about that, Brandon. The quiet certainty in her tone gave him pause. He had heard that register before, usually right before a business rival discovered they had been outmaneuvered. But this was Catherine. His quiet, composed wife who spent her time at charity luncheons and prenatal yoga classes. The woman who had sought his approval before buying a new car, who had asked his opinion on every significant purchase, who had deferred to his judgment on everything from where they lived to what appeared on the dinner table. What is that supposed to mean? Brandon demanded. It means, Patricia said, drawing out another folder, that we have conducted some forensic accounting, Mr. Sterling. Are you aware that your wife inherited a considerable sum when her father passed away 15 years ago? Brandon laughed. Her father was nobody. An immigrant who repaired electronics out of a small shop. An immigrant who held 14 patents in semiconductor technology, Patricia corrected. Patents that were sold to Intel for $40 million. Money that Mrs. Sterling invested with considerable skill. That is impossible. I would have known. Would you? Catherine asked softly. When did you ever ask about my family, Brandon? When did you ever care about anything that was not directly connected to your own advancement? Marcus was leafing through the new documents now, his expression growing paler with each page. Brandon, we need to discuss. Furthermore, Patricia continued, there is the matter of intellectual property theft. The algorithms Sterling Industries has been using for the past 10 years, the ones responsible for generating approximately $300 million in profits, were developed by Mrs. Sterling and are registered to her company. Her company? Brandon's voice cracked. Catherine doesn't have a company. Patricia smiled, the expression of someone about to say checkmate. Chen Technologies, incorporated 20 years ago, the day after your wedding, currently valued at $800 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus's pen, which he had been nervously clicking, went still, mid-click. Brandon's phone, which had been buzzing almost without pause, seemed to fall silent, as if even Scarlett had sensed that something momentous had just shifted. You are lying, Brandon whispered. Catherine rose slowly and deliberately, her pregnancy making the movement graceful rather than labored. Brandon, I have been running a technology empire for 20 years while you assumed I was organizing dinner parties. Every major achievement Sterling Industries recorded came about because I shaped market conditions to favor your decisions. Every brilliant insight you claimed emerged from conversations I carefully arranged. You have not built an empire. You have been playing in a sandbox I constructed. She walked to the window and looked out over Central Park. The prenup is void because of your infidelity during my pregnancy. The intellectual property theft constitutes criminal fraud. You have been stealing from me while deceiving me. So the real question in this divorce is not what I receive, Brandon. The question is whether I pursue criminal charges or allow you to walk away with some shred of dignity. Brandon's phone buzzed. Scarlett again. Brandon, answer me. The wedding planner is waiting. He looked at the phone. Then at Catherine. Then at the documents spread across the table confirming that his wife was worth more than 10 times what he was. This is not over, he said, but there was nothing behind the words. No, Catherine agreed, turning to face him. It is only just beginning. 3 days later, in a building Brandon had never known Catherine owned, the real story began to take shape. The 40-floor glass tower on Madison Avenue housed Chen Technologies, though the name displayed on the building was deliberately unremarkable. Madison Business Center. Catherine had purchased it 10 years prior through a shell company, paying cash in a transaction that briefly made real estate headlines while keeping her name entirely out of it. The building alone was now worth $200 million, Manhattan property values being what they were. Catherine stepped out of the executive elevator, and the atmosphere shifted immediately. Gone was the cautious, deferential housewife Brandon had always known. Here she was, Miss Chen, founder and chief executive, a woman who inspired respect through brilliance rather than commanding it through intimidation. "Good morning, Miss Chen," her assistant, David Park, greeted her using her maiden name with barely concealed relief. David had been with her for 15 years, recruited straight out of MIT, where Catherine had identified his potential during a guest lecture she had delivered under a pseudonym. "Miss Chen, the Tokyo office needs your approval on the merger," another assistant said, appearing with a tablet. "Miss Chen," Forbes called again about the interview. "They are very persistent about including you in their Women in Tech issue." "Tell Forbes not yet," Catherine said, settling into the ergonomic chair she'd had custom designed for pregnant executives after discovering that standard office furniture was not built with pregnant CEOs in mind. But soon, 20 years of staying in the shadows, and Catherine could finally breathe in a space that was entirely her own. Her office, the one Brandon had assumed was the venue for her book club meetings when she had mentioned it once, looked out over Central Park. The walls were lined with awards and patents, all filed under her maiden name or through various holding companies. The MIT Excellence in Innovation Award, the Turing Foundation's Distinguished Achievement Medal, recognition from IEEE for breakthrough contributions to quantum computing applications. "David," she said, pulling up several screens on her desktop, "play Brandon's latest voicemail." Brandon's voice filled the room, slightly unsteady. He had been drinking more in recent weeks. "Catherine, I'm being generous. Offering you the apartment, don't push me. You know you can't survive without my money. Just take the deal and stop embarrassing yourself. This whole charade about owning a company is pathetic. Nobody believes it." David's expression flushed with protective anger. Should I draft a response? Something along the lines of sharing the latest quarterly reports with him? "No," Catherine said, pulling up the financial summaries on her large monitor. "Let him keep thinking what he wants to think. How is our stock performing?" "Up 12% since last quarter. The AI subsidiary you founded is now valued at $300 million on its own. The quantum computing division just secured the Department of Defense contract. That is another $500 million over 5 years. Combined with the remaining holdings, Chen Technologies' total valuation sits at $843 million as of this morning's market close." Catherine allowed herself a small smile. Not bad for a former secretary who contributed nothing. David had been with her long enough to know the whole story. "Why did you stay hidden for so long? Why let him treat you that way? Especially these last few years when it became unbearable." Catherine turned toward the window, her hand resting on her belly as the baby kicked, strong, insistent movements, as though her daughter was already determined to announce herself to the world. "My father taught me patience. He came to America from Taiwan with nothing, built his electronics repair shop into something real. When larger companies tried to claim his patents, he fought them quietly and precisely. He won because they underestimated him." She pulled up an old photograph on her personal screen, herself and her father in his workshop, surrounded by circuit boards and soldering irons. "Before he died, he told me, 'Catherine, find a man who loves you when you have nothing, because that is how you will know it is genuine. But never actually have nothing. Always keep your own power, hidden if necessary.' But Brandon, he loved me when I had nothing," she said quietly. "Or at least I believed he did. So when my father died, I kept the inheritance private. $40 million from the patent sales, along with another $20 million in life insurance and investments my father had quietly built. I told Brandon my father left behind nothing but debt, and he accepted it completely because it matched the story he already wanted to believe, that he had rescued me." She pulled up a detailed financial chart mapping 20 years of market activity. "Look at this. Every significant achievement Sterling Industries recorded over the past 20 years. Do you see the pattern? 3 months before each breakthrough, Chen Technologies made strategic moves that created exactly the right conditions. When Brandon decided to push into Asian markets, I had already built relationships there. When he required capital for acquisitions, investors appeared with precisely the right amounts. You were orchestrating his entire career. Not orchestrating, Catherine corrected. Testing. I wanted to see whether success would change him, whether he would grow into a true partner once he felt secure in himself. Instead, he got worse. The more Sterling Industries flourished, the more he minimized my involvement, the more he treated me like a decorative addition rather than a person. David brought up another screen. Speaking of Sterling Industries, we have a situation. The forensic accountants uncovered something significant. Catherine leaned forward, studying the data. The numbers were more severe than she had anticipated. He drew from my investment accounts to fund his personal projects. $2 million over the past 3 years, all moved without authorization. But that is not the worst of it. David pulled up a side-by-side code comparison. The algorithms Sterling Industries has been running, your algorithms, he has been licensing them to competitors under his own name. We are looking at intellectual property theft worth hundreds of millions. Catherine leaned back, her expression measured and deliberate. This changed the picture significantly. Brandon had not simply cheated on her emotionally and physically. He had stolen from her in the process and then sold what he had taken. Patricia needs to see this right away, she said. But David, I also want you to begin something else in parallel. Start the process of making Chen Technologies' true identity known. Begin with the tech blogs. Give them just enough to follow the trail. I want the reveal to feel like it emerged naturally, not like it was staged. It will set off a media storm. When people discover you are worth $800 million and Brandon is only worth 50, it will reshape everything. Good, Catherine said firmly. Then perhaps other women in similar positions will understand that they have choices. Financial independence after 50 is not just an aspiration. It is entirely achievable with the right preparation. David nodded, then hesitated. There is something else. We intercepted communications between Scarlett Rose and someone named Marcus. Not Brandon's lawyer, a different Marcus. She is not who she appears to be. Catherine raised an eyebrow. Her real name is Sandra Kowalski. She has done this before. Targeted wealthy married men, persuaded them to leave their wives, then stripped them of everything. She has a partner who helps her run the scheme. They have been planning this for over a year. They specifically identified Brandon at a conference in Las Vegas, the one where he claimed to have made the connection that led to the Tokyo merger. Catherine laughed, but there was nothing warm in it, of course. She was running a play on him from the very start. Should we warn him? Catherine considered the question, then shook her head. He would not believe us. He would read it as jealousy or bitterness. And frankly, he deserves to learn this particular lesson firsthand. Send everything to Patricia, though. It may prove useful in court. Her phone buzzed. A message from Margaret Wilson, one of the few genuine friends who knew the full truth about her circumstances. Saw Brandon at the club with that child. She was wearing your grandmother's necklace, the one he said went missing. Catherine's jaw tightened. Her grandmother's necklace, a simple jade pendant that had passed through her family for generations. She had spent months blaming herself for losing it, convinced she had been careless. Brandon had taken it and given it to his mistress. David, she said, and her voice carried an edge he rarely heard from her. Accelerate the timeline. I want the Sterling Industries board to know who actually holds the majority shares by the end of this week. You own shares in Sterling Industries? Catherine smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had spent far too long performing the role of prey. 60%, acquired through various holding companies over the years. Every time Brandon needed emergency capital, I was the mysterious investor who appeared at exactly the right moment. He was so relieved, so appreciative. He never once questioned where the money came from or why the terms were always so favorable. She moved to stand at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Somewhere out there, Brandon was probably enjoying lunch with Scarlett, sketching out their future with money he believed was his, never suspecting he had been living inside a house of cards that Catherine had assembled and could bring down with a whisper. It is time for my midlife transformation story to become visible, she said. 20 years of staying hidden is enough. Let us show the world what a dismissed housewife can accomplish when people make the mistake of underestimating her. Brandon stood at the podium in Sterling Industries' press room, His silver hair shaped to perfection by the stylist who had spent an hour engineering an image of approachable success. His media trainer's exact phrase. The lighting had been adjusted 3 times to soften the shadows under his eyes, evidence of nights spent in tense conversations with lawyers. His expression was calibrated to project quiet gravity with threads of cautious optimism. He had practiced it in the mirror that morning until it looked effortless. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his delivery carrying the weight of a man who took himself seriously. The teleprompter held his prepared statement, though Brandon preferred to create the impression he was speaking from the heart. "I want to speak openly and honestly about the rumors surrounding my personal life." Catherine watched from her office. David was beside her, tracking social media activity on a tablet in real time. The reactions were already flowing in, and the majority of them were not kind to Brandon. "After 20 years of marriage," Brandon continued, "Catherine and I have grown in different directions. While I have been developing Sterling Industries into the institution it is today, she has been unable to adapt to the demands of being a CEO's wife." "Unable to adapt," David muttered. "You literally run a larger company than he does." Catherine gestured for him to be quiet. She wanted to hear the entire performance. She had known this was coming. Brandon's need to shape the narrative was as predictable as his Thursday tea times. "The pressures of my position, the late evenings, the constant travel, they take a toll on a marriage," Brandon continued, his voice thick with practiced regret. "Catherine is a good woman, but she comes from a modest background. She never fully understood the sacrifices required for success at this level." A reporter raised her hand. Jennifer Chen, Wall Street Journal. Someone Catherine had quietly guided stories to for years. "Mr. Sterling, your wife is 7 months pregnant. How does that factor into this?" Brandon's jaw briefly tightened, a reflex Catherine recognized from 20 years of shared meals and difficult conversations. He was furious but working to contain it. "Catherine will be provided for within the terms of our prenuptial agreement. I am not the villain in this story. My soon-to-be ex-wife contributed nothing to my success. She has been living off my efforts for 2 decades, and I have been more than fair." Another reporter, this one from TechCrunch. "Is it true you are already engaged to Miss Rose?" Brandon's expression shifted into something he believed read as humble warmth. "I have found a real partner in Scarlett Rose. Someone who understands ambition, drive, and the cost of building something meaningful." Scarlett stepped out from the wings, and the cameras surged. She wore a designer dress that Catherine recognized immediately. She had donated it to charity the previous year after wearing it once to a gala Brandon had forgotten to attend. The irony was not lost on her. Scarlett held her hand up to display an enormous diamond ring that fractured the light in every direction. "Brandon proposed last night. We are planning a spring wedding, something intimate, close family and friends." "By intimate, she means $1 million production in the Hamptons," David said under his breath. Catherine switched off the screen. "He is really burying himself, isn't he?" "The internet is dismantling him," David said, turning his tablet toward her. "The hashtag Poor Catherine is already trending. Someone found old photos of the two of you from before Sterling Industries. You both look genuinely happy in them." Catherine glanced at the images, herself and Brandon in their small Queens apartment. Her in a simple sundress, him in jeans and a worn shirt, both grinning as if they had just been handed everything they had ever wanted. She remembered that day. They had just gotten engaged, and Brandon had made promises that stretched as far as she could see. He had eventually delivered on them. He had just neglected to mention that what he was handing her was a beautifully furnished enclosure. Later that afternoon, Catherine had a regular obstetrics appointment at Mount Sinai. The waiting room was full of pregnant women at varying stages of their pregnancies, some accompanied by attentive partners, others on their own, like her. She had stopped feeling self-conscious about Brandon's absence somewhere around the 4th month. While she waited, she caught fragments of a conversation between 2 nurses nearby. "Did you see that press conference? That poor woman, 7 months along, and he puts his new girlfriend on television beside him. Men like him always trade in for a newer version. Though honestly, the wife looks better off without him. Can you imagine spending 20 years married to someone like that? Still, imagine being set aside after all that time. She probably has no real skills, no money of her own. These society wives rarely do. She will walk away with some settlement, but it will not cover the life she has grown accustomed to." Catherine smiled quietly behind her magazine, this month's issue of Wired, which contained a piece about innovative AI applications in medicine. The journalist had conducted an interview with the elusive founder of Chen Technologies via encrypted email, never realizing they were corresponding with the same pregnant woman now sitting in a doctor's waiting room. Her phone rang. Patricia Morrison. Catherine, you need to hear this. My forensic accountants found more than fraud. Brandon has been using your investment algorithms, the ones you created, and licensing them to competitors as his own intellectual property. We are talking about corporate theft on a significant scale. How much? Potentially hundreds of millions in damages. Catherine, we could dismantle him completely. Criminal charges, civil litigation, total financial ruin. Catherine stood as the nurse called her name. Patricia, I do not want to dismantle him. I want something better. I want the truth to surface on its own. Let him dig further. The deeper he goes, the more dramatic the revelation will be. You are playing a very long game. I have been playing a long game for 20 years, Catherine said. I can manage a few more weeks. Besides, I want him to marry Scarlett first. You want him to marry the con artist? I want him to receive exactly what he believes he wants, Catherine said. A younger, more decorative partner who truly understands his world. Let him discover for himself what that actually means. Scarlett Rose reclined in a private suite at Serenity Spa, her phone pressed to her ear during her third facial of the week, all billed to Brandon's card. The esthetician worked in practiced silence, accustomed to clients conducting personal conversations as if no one else were present. Baby, you should see this man, Scarlett said, her voice dropping from its professional sweetness to its natural harder pitch as she spoke to her real partner. Brandon is even easier to work with than we expected. He genuinely believes I am in love with him. Toby, Catherine's private investigator, positioned in the adjacent suite with high-quality recording equipment, adjusted his earpiece. Every syllable was being captured with perfect clarity. The divorce settlement is the complication, Scarlett continued, examining her freshly finished nails. That pathetic wife of his might not get much because of the prenup, but every dollar she collects is one less for us. Though honestly, she is so plain, no wonder he moved on. She laughed, a brittle sound. You should have seen her at that charity event last month. 7 months pregnant, trying to hold herself together with grace, while everyone in the room knew her husband had already replaced her. It was genuinely sad. All those women rallying around her, pretending she was not in a desperate situation. How long until you can divorce him and take your share? Marcus asked through the phone. My attorney says 18 months minimum to make it look credible. But listen to this. The fool already agreed to no prenuptial agreement with me. Can you believe it? He made his wife sign one, but he thinks I am different. That is what ego does to men. He assumes that because I am young and he finds me appealing, my feelings must be real. The spa attendant entered carrying Scarlett's gold-infused mask, an $800 treatment that claimed to reverse the signs of aging, though Scarlett was 23 and had nothing to reverse. I need to go, baby. Remember, for now, you are just my personal trainer as far as Brandon is concerned. Once I am Mrs. Sterling and have access to everything, we can stop performing. The financial independence after 50 crowd can hold on to their motivational phrases. I am getting mine at 23. She ended the call and rang Brandon immediately, her voice shifting back to a honeyed register as smoothly as flipping a switch. Darling, I am at the spa you recommended. You are so thoughtful. I may have gone slightly over budget on shopping today. You do not mind, do you? I found the most beautiful necklace at Cartier. It reminded me of your eyes. Brandon's response through the phone was warm and indulgent, the tone of a man who believed he was in command. Anything for you, sweetheart. Catherine never appreciated beautiful things. She once told me a necklace was just compressed carbon. Can you imagine? No sense of romance at all. She sounds dreadful, Scarlett cooed. How did you manage 20 years? I ask myself that constantly. But now I have you, someone who understands what it means to be the partner of a successful man. Catherine received the recording 3 hours later. She listened to it while sitting in the nursery she had been preparing. Soft yellows and greens, gender neutral in palette, despite the fact that she already knew she was carrying a daughter. Brandon had never asked about the baby's sex. He had been too occupied posting photographs with Scarlett, images in which he appeared like a middle-aged man trying frantically to outrun his own reflection. She is a professional, the investigator told Catherine over a secure line. This is her fourth wealthy target. The previous three were too humiliated to pursue charges after she had taken what she came for. One of them did not survive the aftermath. Send everything to Patricia, Catherine said, her voice level. But do not release it yet. I want Brandon to marry her first. He needs to fully experience the consequences of the decisions he has made. You want him to marry a con artist? Catherine smiled, feeling the baby move beneath her hand. He deserves exactly what he believes he wants. A younger, more glamorous partner who understands his position. Let him find out in person what that truly looks like. Sometimes the most complete form of accountability is not destroying someone yourself. It is standing back and watching them bring the whole thing down on their own. That same evening, Brandon arrived at the country club with Scarlett on his arm. The same club where Catherine had held membership for 15 years, where she had served on the board for 10, where she had carefully built relationships that had quietly enabled Brandon's business dealings without his knowledge. Catherine was there for the monthly charity board meeting, something Brandon had forgotten despite her reminder that morning by text. She had dressed in a simple but polished maternity dress and her grandmother's pearls, not the jade pendant Brandon had taken, but a strand of pearls he had never noticed because they were not showy enough for his taste. He entered with Scarlett beside him, her designer dress cut in a way that was conspicuously wrong for the conservative setting, her laughter a register too loud, her gestures slightly too large. Catherine was seated with the other board members, all women over 50 who had known her for years, who had watched her make herself smaller for 2 decades without ever fully understanding why. Catherine, darling, Brandon announced loudly enough for the room to catch every word. You should really be at home resting, not desperately trying to stay relevant. In your condition, these late evenings cannot be doing you any good. The room went still. 200 of Manhattan's most established residents turned to look. The club president, Mrs. Eleanor Fitzgerald, no relation to Brandon's lawyer, actually drew an audible breath at the directness of his rudeness. Catherine rose from her chair slowly and deliberately, commanding the room's full attention with the same assurance she brought to boardrooms Brandon had never entered. The baby shifted inside her as she stood, as though lending its own quiet support. Brandon, she said, her voice moving through the room without effort, I have been a presence at this club for quite some time. It is interesting how often men fail to notice what their wives are actually doing with their days. She moved closer, each step deliberate. The other board members observed her with barely contained satisfaction. They had been waiting for this. But you are right about one thing. I should be more selective about the company I keep. Some associations are simply not worth the time. A wave of murmuring moved through the crowd. Someone near the back whispered, Doesn't she own this place? Mrs. Fitzgerald rose. Actually, Mr. Sterling, you should be aware that Catherine owns this country club. She has for 15 years. She purchased it with her inheritance and transformed it from a failing institution into the premier social establishment in Manhattan. Every renovation, every prestigious new membership, every successful fundraiser, all of that was Catherine. Brandon's color drained. Scarlett's grip on his arm tightened, her instincts already recalibrating the situation. That is not possible, Brandon managed. You were a secretary. I was working as a secretary, Brandon. There is a meaningful difference, just as there is a difference between building something real and claiming credit for someone else's work. Catherine addressed the room. If you will all excuse me, I have a conference call with Tokyo. Some of us actually operate our own companies. She walked out, leaving Brandon standing with his mouth open as Scarlett's nails dug into his arm and she hissed. You said she had nothing. You told me she was nobody. This changes everything. David Park sat in Catherine's real office, the one with the view over Central Park rather than the staged one Brandon had briefly glimpsed and dismissed, coordinating with a team of private investigators across 3 screens. The investigation into Scarlett Rose, whose legal name was Sandra Kowalski, had revealed a pattern of deception that would have been impressive if it were not so calculated and predatory. We have traced Scarlett's history, the lead investigator reported via encrypted video call. She follows a consistent method. She identifies married men during vulnerable periods, typically midlife transitions or significant career pressure. She builds a detailed profile of exactly what each target needs in a partner, sometimes spending months preparing, and then she becomes that person. Catherine reviewed the files while her other hand rested on her belly. The baby had been active throughout the morning, as though responding to the tension in the room. Previous confirmed cases, 3 documented, 2 suspected. A pharmaceutical executive in Chicago lost $4 million over 18 months. A real estate developer in Miami lost $6 million, and his company. A senator from Texas. That situation became complicated and was settled privately. He is still in therapy. Why did none of them pursue charges? Embarrassment. These are influential men who cannot bear to acknowledge they were completely fooled by flattery and a well-crafted performance. She is methodical about making everything appear organic. Gifts, transfers presented as freely given. She documents the relationship deliberately to make it look authentic in any legal setting. Love letters, photographs, videos. She builds a record that would hold up under scrutiny. Catherine pulled up Sterling Industries' financial records. She still had access through her shell company's board seats. She has already cost Brandon $2 million in 3 weeks. At this pace, she will exhaust his accounts before the wedding. Should we warn him? David asked, though his expression suggested he already anticipated her response. Catherine considered it, then shook her head slowly. He has made his choice, and would he believe us? He would interpret it as jealousy or manipulation. A man like Brandon, someone who has spent decades seeing himself as the cleverest person in any room, cannot genuinely conceive that he is being played the way he played me. Her secure phone buzzed. A message from one of her board members at Sterling Industries. Emergency meeting requested. Brandon attempting to push through the sale of company assets. Needs your shares to block the vote. Catherine smiled. David, it is time. Release the first wave of information about Chen Technologies. Start with TechCrunch. They have been circling the story about the mysterious company making significant moves in quantum computing. How much do you want to reveal? Just enough to spark curiosity. Valued at over $500 million. Founder choosing to remain private. Major contracts with Fortune 500 companies. Give them the thread and let them pull it. Journalists are drawn to unsolved mysteries. That afternoon, Catherine arrived at the monthly charity luncheon at the Carlisle Hotel, now 8 months pregnant. She moved more carefully than she had in earlier months, but carried herself with an undiminished grace. She had dressed in designer maternity wear that spoke quietly of wealth rather than announcing it. Her mother's pearl earrings, the ones Brandon had never once remarked on because they lacked the flash he associated with status. Margaret Wilson was already there, holding a seat for her. You look absolutely radiant, Margaret said, then leaned closer and lowered her voice. Unlike your soon-to-be former husband, who looks as though he has aged 10 years in the past month. As though drawn by the mention, Brandon entered with Scarlett. He had clearly been drinking. His complexion was heightened, his stride just slightly imprecise. Scarlett held his arm, her eyes moving across the room with the practiced efficiency of someone always assessing the landscape. The encounter unfolded during the cocktail hour. Brandon, emboldened by whiskey and Scarlett's quiet encouragement, made his way to Catherine's table. She was seated among 6 other women, each distinguished in her own right. A federal judge, a best-selling author, a hedge fund manager, 2 physicians, a university president. Ladies, he said with manufactured charm, then shifted his focus entirely to Catherine. You're looking tired. The divorce proceedings taking their toll, I suppose. Fighting a battle you cannot win will do that. Actually, I have never had more energy, Catherine replied, not looking up from her phone, where she was signing off on a $40 million acquisition. Remarkable what happens when you remove genuinely toxic elements from your daily life. Scarlett offered her practiced laugh. Brandon has been so concerned about you, haven't you, darling? All on your own, managing without him. It must be quite daunting, facing your 50s with a failed marriage and nothing else to show for it. Margaret made a sound into her champagne. Yes, Catherine is really struggling. Just yesterday, she was deliberating over whether to buy that tech startup for $40 million or wait for the price to drop to 35. Brandon's attention snapped to Catherine. What startup? You do not have $40 million. Catherine looked up from her phone for the first time, her expression entirely composed. You are right, Brandon. I do not have $40 million. Brandon's expression settled briefly into something like relief. I have $800 million, Catherine continued, the same conversational tone she might use to order coffee. Give or take a few million, depending on what the market does. But who is really keeping count? The silence that followed was complete. Scarlett's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor, the sound ringing out through the sudden quiet like punctuation. "You are lying," Brandon whispered. Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. A few taps brought up a news article that had gone live moments before. Chen Technologies revealed as major player in tech industry. Mysterious company valued at over 800 million. Founder's identity still unknown. She turned the screen toward him. "That is my company. It has been for 20 years. Every algorithm you have been running, mine. Every improbably accurate market prediction, me. Every mysterious investor who appeared at exactly the right moment to rescue Sterling Industries, also me." "This is fraud," Brandon said loudly, drawing attention from across the room. "You concealed assets. That is illegal in a marriage." Judge Patricia Hendris, who was seated at the adjacent table, turned calmly in her chair. "Actually, Mr. Sterling, preserving separate assets acquired before the marriage or through inheritance is entirely lawful. What is illegal is misappropriating someone else's intellectual property and profiting from it as your own, which, based on what has been disclosed, is precisely what you have been doing with your wife's algorithms." Brandon's complexion cycled through several shades. "You do not know what you are talking about." "I know exactly what I am talking about," the judge replied, with a coolness that left no room for debate. "I am also aware that your divorce proceedings are scheduled in my courtroom next week. I would strongly recommend securing more capable legal representation than Mr. Fitzgerald. He is clearly out of his depth here." Scarlett tugged at Brandon's sleeve. "We should leave, baby. These women are just envious." Catherine laughed. A genuine, unguarded sound that appeared to take even her by surprise. "Scarlett, or should I say Sandra Kowalski, I am many things, but envious of you is not among them. How is Marcus, by the way? Your actual partner?" Scarlett went very still. "I have no idea what you are referring to." "Then you will not object to me sharing these recordings with Brandon." She brought up her phone again. "The ones from the spa this morning. The ones in which you describe him as an idiot and outline your plans to take him for everything he has." "Those are fabricated," Scarlett said immediately. "Far too quickly." Brandon looked between the two women, the anger in his face giving way to something more uncertain. "What recordings?" "The ones from this morning. Would you like to hear them, Brandon? Would you like to understand what your true partner actually thinks of you?" Scarlett moved to take his arm. "She is inventing all of this. She is a discarded wife looking for any way to cause trouble. Let us go." But Brandon was watching Catherine now, looking at her with a focus he had not brought to her in years. She stood there, 8 months pregnant with his child, surrounded by accomplished women who clearly held her in genuine regard, holding documented proof that she was worth vastly more than he had ever imagined, and offering him the truth about the woman he had thrown everything away to be with. "Play them," he said quietly. "Brandon." He removed Scarlett's hand from his arm without looking at her. "Play the recording." Catherine pressed play. Scarlett's voice filled the surrounding quiet. "Baby, you should see this man. Brandon is even easier to work than we thought. He genuinely believes I am in love with him." No one spoke as the recording continued. Brandon's face changed as he listened to Scarlett describe him as desperate, as he heard her laugh at how eager he was to feel young again, as he listened to her map out exactly how she intended to take everything he had. When it ended, Scarlett was already retreating toward the exit. "That is not me. That is some kind of manipulation. A deep fake." "It is your voice," Brandon said, in a tone Catherine had never once heard from him. "The real one. The one I thought I was hearing when you thought I was asleep." Scarlett's composure dissolved completely. "You foolish man. Do you think you are special? You are nothing but another midlife crisis with a bank account. At least your wife was perceptive enough to protect her money. You practically handed yours to me." She walked out, her heels striking the marble floor in sharp, departing rhythm. Brandon remained standing, slightly unsteady, looking as though the floor had shifted beneath him. Catherine felt a brief, involuntary tug of sympathy. "Almost." "Catherine," he started. "No," she said with quiet finality. "Do not. You made your choices, Brandon. Now you live with them." She moved past him, her posture steady, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Behind her, she heard Margaret say to someone nearby, "Now that is how you handle 2 decades of narcissistic behavior with complete class." The Sterling Industries boardroom had never felt this pressurized. Emergency session, called with less than 2 hours' notice. Brandon entered with the confident stride of a man who assumed this was about managing a story, about reshaping the narrative to his advantage. He had been handling this board for 15 years. They were his colleagues, his allies. "Gentlemen," he began, apparently not registering the slight expressions on the faces of the 3 women board members at the dismissive greeting. "I understand there have been some concerns about my personal circumstances, but I assure you—" "Mr. Sterling," the chairman, Robert Blackstone, interrupted. His voice carried a coldness Brandon had never heard from him before. "We are not here about your divorce. We are here regarding a request from the majority shareholder." "What majority shareholder?" Brandon forced a laugh, the sound hollow even to himself. "I own 40%. The remainder is distributed among 15 separate investors." "Was distributed," Robert corrected. "Until this morning, when we received confirmation that several shell companies all trace back to the same entity. Mr. Sterling, the majority shareholder, is on the line now." The conference phone at the center of the mahogany table came to life with a soft crackle. "Good afternoon, everyone." Brandon stopped breathing. He knew that voice. He had heard it every morning for 2 decades, usually offering to refill his coffee or reminding him of appointments he had allowed to slip from his mind. But something was different now, a composure, an authority he had never once associated with it. "Catherine," he said softly. "Miss Chen, actually," Catherine corrected. "I have held 60% of Sterling Industries for the past 5 years, purchased gradually during each period when you needed emergency capital and did not want to dilute your personal stake. You were so grateful to those mysterious investors every time they appeared. Do you remember?" The board members exchanged glances. Several had quietly suspected something of this nature, but had not been able to assemble the full picture until now. Martha Rodriguez, the CFO, was already opening records on her laptop, her eyes widening with each entry she uncovered. "This is criminal," Brandon said, striking the table with his palm. "Insider trading, market manipulation, fraud. Everything was executed through proper channels with complete regulatory compliance." Catherine's voice remained steady through the speaker. "I have had excellent legal counsel for 20 years, Brandon. You never noticed because you assumed the invoices you occasionally glimpsed were for a divorce attorney I obviously could not afford." Robert cleared his throat. "Miss Chen has formally requested a vote of no confidence in the current chief executive." "You cannot do this," Brandon said, his face deepening in color. "I built this company with my own hands, from the ground up." "Using whose initial investment?" Catherine asked. "I suggest you review the incorporation documents, Brandon, page 47, subsection 3A. That $100,000 in seed capital you have always described as proof of your entrepreneurial instinct. It came from my father's life insurance. I gave it to you as a wedding gift. You said we did not need paperwork between us because we were in love. Do you remember saying that?" Martha turned her laptop screen so the room could see. There it was, documented clearly. Catherine Chen, initial investor, dated 3 days after their wedding. "But more critically," Catherine continued, "let us address the algorithms you have been licensing to outside parties." "My algorithms, Brandon. The ones I designed while you assumed I was managing our social calendar. That constitutes corporate theft, and the relevant federal agencies are inclined to view it seriously." "Federal agencies?" Brandon's voice cracked. "Yes. They have a particular interest in how Sterling Industries' proprietary trading systems match the intellectual property portfolio registered to Chen Technologies. A portfolio I registered, it should be noted, 3 years before Sterling Industries ever claimed to have developed them." Robert stood. "Mr. Sterling, in light of these disclosures, I am calling for an immediate vote. All those in favor of removing Brandon Sterling as CEO." Every hand in the room rose. Every hand except Brandon's. Motion carried. "Mr. Sterling, security will escort you to collect your personal effects. You have 1 hour. Company property, including all devices and files, stays here." 2 security officers entered, their expressions professionally composed but their posture leaving no room for argument. Brandon pushed himself upright on unsteady legs. Catherine, please, we should talk about this. You are carrying my child, our child, Catherine said, and she will grow up knowing that her mother built an empire while her father was busy trying to take credit for it. She will understand what financial independence means, what it looks like to refuse to be made smaller than you are. This is not the end of this, Brandon said as security moved toward him. Actually, it is, Catherine replied. And Brandon, Scarlett left the country this morning. Her partner, Marcus, had outstanding warrants in 3 states. You may want to cancel the credit cards you gave her. She used every one of them on her way to the airport. As security walked Brandon toward the exit, his phone began buzzing without pause. The news was already moving. TechCrunch had just published. Shocking revelation. Sterling Industries, actually controlled by hidden tech empire, belonging to CEO's pregnant wife. The Forbes headline was sharper still. From secretary to secret billionaire, how Catherine Chen played the long game. But the one that would cut Brandon most deeply came from the Wall Street Journal. Sterling Industries stock surges on CEO change. Markets celebrate Catherine Chen's takeover. Within 6 hours, the story had spread the way only modern revelations can. Catherine Chen was trending globally. The top hashtag in the United States was more direct. Sir Brandon got played. Memes multiplied across every platform. Brandon's self-satisfied press conference announcing the divorce set beside headlines about Catherine's worth. His photograph with Scarlett placed next to a mugshot internet investigators had turned up from a prior arrest. The tech press was fully absorbed. TechCrunch published a deep investigation. The 20-year long game. How Catherine Chen built an empire while her husband took the applause. They had found the patents, the shell company registrations, even anonymous forum posts from years back traceable to Catherine's IP addresses, showing she had been an active participant in the tech world while performing the role of a society housewife. Wired ran an exclusive. We interviewed the mysterious founder of Chen Technologies 5 years ago. We just did not know it was Catherine Sterling. The piece revealed that Catherine had been corresponding with technology journalists under various pseudonyms for years, predicting market trajectories and technological shifts with an accuracy that had been noted but never fully explained. Brandon, now occupying a hotel room because the penthouse had always been in Catherine's name, another late revelation he was still absorbing, watched his net worth dissolve in real time. Sterling Industries stock was climbing, but he no longer held any of it. His personal accounts were frozen pending the ongoing investigation. Scarlett had exhausted his credit lines to the tune of $300,000 in her final run before boarding her flight. His phone cycled through stages of deterioration. First, fury. Catherine, after 20 years of marriage, this is how you choose to settle things. Then negotiation. We have 20 years of history. That has to count for something. I made mistakes, but we can work through this. Then something much more desperate. I have nothing left. The FBI is involved. My lawyers have withdrawn. I am staying at a Holiday Inn, Catherine. A Holiday Inn. Each message landed in her voicemail and stayed there. Catherine was occupied with more pressing matters. The arrival of her daughter, the public launch of Chen Technologies. The future that had been waiting, patiently, for 20 years. The hearing for the divorce settlement was held on a Thursday morning. Judge Patricia Hendress, known throughout the legal community for her measured and unsentimental approach to high net worth cases, reviewed the evidence with an expression of slowly climbing eyebrows. Mr. Sterling, she said, looking across the bench at Brandon, who had arrived in an off-the-rack suit. His wardrobe had been seized as part of the ongoing evidence review. Allow me to summarize what is in front of me. You have admitted to an 8-month affair conducted during your wife's pregnancy. You have been demonstrated to have appropriated proprietary algorithms from your wife's company. You transferred $2 million from her investment accounts without any authorization. You attempted to conceal assets during divorce proceedings. And you are presenting this court with what request exactly? Brandon's new attorney, the only one willing to take the case without an upfront retainer Brandon could no longer provide, managed a halting response about marital contributions and shared household assets. Your Honor, Patricia Morrison rose, composed as always, in a suit whose value exceeded Brandon's current net worth. My client is prepared to release the $2 million in transferred funds and will not initiate criminal proceedings for the intellectual property theft, despite the FBI's active interest in pursuing those charges. In exchange, she is requesting full custody of the child with supervised visitation rights for Mr. Sterling and no financial support from him in any form. The judge paused. She is not seeking alimony in a 20-year marriage? Your Honor, as of this morning's market close, my client is valued at $843 million. She does not require Mr. Sterling's financial support. She never did. However, she would like to make a brief statement. Catherine stood, heavily pregnant and carrying herself with the unhurried dignity of someone who had already secured every outcome that mattered. Your Honor, whatever sum might have been awarded to me, I would like to direct it to the Manhattan Women's Shelter, specifically toward their new program for women over 50 who are leaving situations of narcissistic abuse within their marriages. I would like the program to carry the name, the Phoenix Fund, for women rising from what was into what they are meant to become. The judge nodded with visible approval. That is a generous gesture, Miss Chen. Mr. Sterling, you are being treated with remarkable leniency here. Criminal charges in this matter could have resulted in meaningful prison time. I strongly suggest you accept this agreement. Brandon signed the papers with a trembling hand, watching his last formal claim to the life he had built, or believed he had built, dissolve from beneath him. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered thickly. Catherine, flanked by Patricia and David, moved through most of them without stopping, but she paused for one. Jennifer Chen of the Wall Street Journal, the same reporter who had asked the uncomfortable questions at Brandon's press conference. Miss Chen, how does it feel to come out the other side of all this? Catherine considered the question. This was never about winning. It is about showing women that transition is possible. It is about financial independence after 50. It is about demonstrating that a midlife turning point does not have to be the place where your story ends. Sometimes it is exactly where it begins. What is next for you? Chen Technologies will go public next month. We are also launching a program to help women over 50 build their own companies from the ground up. And personally, she placed her hand on her belly. I am about to meet my daughter. Everything else comes after that. Any words for your former husband? Catherine paused for a moment. I hope Brandon grows through this. I hope he recognizes that success constructed on someone else's foundation is not real success. And I hope he becomes a better father than he was a partner. As her car pulled away, she caught a glimpse of Brandon stepping through a side exit, doing his best to avoid the cameras. He looked reduced somehow. His shoulders were forward, the manufactured confidence entirely absent, replaced by the particular quality of a man who has lost his footing and is still trying to locate the ground. For a brief instant, their eyes connected through the car window. Catherine did not smile, did not allow herself satisfaction at his diminishment. She simply acknowledged him. A quiet recognition of what they had once been and everything they no longer were. Then she turned away. The delivery room at Mount Sinai stood in sharp contrast to the cold courtroom where Catherine's marriage had been formally concluded 2 weeks prior. Here, surrounded by people she had genuinely chosen, Catherine moved toward the arrival of new life. Margaret Wilson held one hand, Patricia Morrison held the other. David Park moved in steady circles in the waiting room, alongside a dozen employees from Chen Technologies who had all insisted on being present. The entire Chen Technologies board had sent flowers. The room looked like something from a garden in full season. You are doing beautifully, Dr. Sarah Chen, no familial connection despite the shared surname, encouraged warmly. One more strong effort. Catherine pushed forward, drawing on the same reserves that had carried her through 2 decades of concealment, the same resolve that had raised an empire in the background, the same endurance that had survived Brandon's slow erosion of her sense of self. And then, through everything else, it arrived. The sound of new life. Elizabeth Chen's first cry entered the world with clarity and force, announcing herself without hesitation. She is everything, the nurse said softly, lowering the baby onto Catherine's chest. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of absolutely everything. Catherine looked down at her daughter. Elizabeth had her mother's dark hair, dense and unruly from the first moments. When she opened her eyes, they carried the deep blue of newborns, a shade that might shift over weeks into brown like Catherine's or hold to blue like Brandon's. But what seized Catherine's attention was the expression on her daughter's face. Alert, watchful, already paying close attention to the world she had just entered. Hello, Elizabeth, Catherine whispered. Welcome to a very different world than the one I thought I was preparing for you. A better one. I am certain of that. Margaret leaned over, her eyes full. She is beautiful, Catherine. She looks like you. She looks like herself, Catherine said gently. Her own person from the very first breath. 3 hours later, after the necessary checks had been completed and Elizabeth had nursed successfully for the first time, Catherine was settling into the recovery room when a figure appeared hesitantly in the doorway. Brandon stood there holding gas station carnations, the kind dyed in colors that exist nowhere in nature. He looked terrible. The suit he wore was clearly the same one from the courthouse, now deeply creased. He had lost weight in a way that made his clothes hang off him awkwardly. His silver hair, usually cultivated to project calm authority, was uncombed. He looked every year of his 58 and a fair number of additional years beyond that. May I come in? His voice carried an uncertainty she had never once heard from him before. Catherine glanced at Patricia, who was already on her feet. I will be right outside, her attorney said, conveying a clear message to Brandon as she passed him. Brandon moved into the room slowly, staying near the doorway, holding the wilted flowers against his chest as if they offered some form of protection. She is beautiful, he said, looking at Elizabeth sleeping quietly in Catherine's arms. She looks like you. That seems to be the general view, Catherine said, her tone measured. Catherine, he started, and then fell into silence, evidently searching for somewhere to begin. Scarlett has gone. She took everything she was able to carry and disappeared. According to the FBI, she and her partner had been planning this for over a year. They tell me I am fortunate she did not take more. I know, Catherine said plainly. You knew? His expression shifted slightly. You could have told me. Would you have believed me? Catherine asked. At what point in our marriage did you trust my judgment about anything significant? When I cautioned you about the Technotron merger? When I suggested diversifying the investment portfolio? When I said that Scarlett seemed worth looking into more carefully? Brandon had no response to that. He lowered himself into the visitor's chair, the vinyl protesting under him. I have lost everything, the company, whatever reputation I had, my savings. I am doing consulting work now. No, that is not quite accurate. I am working as a junior analyst at a firm that happens to be owned by Chen Technologies. I take direction from someone 15 years younger than me. You have not lost everything, Catherine said, adjusting Elizabeth gently against her. You still have the chance to be her father. A real one, this time around. Catherine, I made a serious mistake. The words fell out of him, rehearsed beneath their urgency. You are my wife. We have 20 years between us. This can still be repaired. I have learned from all of this. Catherine looked at him steadily. She looked at him in a way she had not allowed herself to in years, without managing the moment or preparing for what she might say next. He looked diminished. Stripped of the CEO title, the younger girlfriend, the constructed sense of superiority. This was Brandon without any of the armor. And what remained was far less than either of them might have hoped. I was never truly your wife, Brandon, she said quietly but without wavering. I was your investor, your strategist, your safety net when things fell apart. I was the woman who made herself smaller so you could feel sufficient. But I was never your partner in any real sense. A partner is someone whose voice is heard, whose contributions are acknowledged, whose presence is valued. You never allowed me to be any of those things. I can change. No, Catherine said. And more honestly, I no longer need you to, not for my sake. But Elizabeth will need a father. I hope you can be that for her, a more present one than you were a husband. How do I do that? Brandon's voice broke slightly. How do I be a father when I have nothing left to offer, when I am no one? Catherine adjusted Elizabeth so that Brandon could see her daughter's face more clearly. You offer her time. You offer her genuine attention. You offer her real interest in the person she is going to become. Everything you never gave me, you can still give her. That is worth more than anything money measures, Brandon. I am in a position to know. I had all the money in the world, and it could not buy me an honest marriage. Brandon stood to leave, setting the sad flowers on the bedside table, where they looked even more out of place beside the abundant arrangements from Catherine's real friends. For whatever it is worth, he said, I will be cooperating fully with the FBI regarding Scarlett. They found her at the airport. She had 3 separate passports. Good, Catherine said. Perhaps it will prevent her from doing this to someone else. Brandon paused at the door. Catherine, why did you stay for 20 years? With all of that power, all of that money, why remain? Catherine considered the question. It was one she had returned to countless times herself. At the beginning, it was love. Then it became hope. Then it was strategy. I needed Chen Technologies to be strong enough to exist entirely on its own before I walked away. And at the end of it, she looked down at Elizabeth. It was timing. Everything unfolded at exactly the right moment. Had I left you 5 years earlier, 10 years earlier, the company would not be what it is now. I would not be who I am now. And Elizabeth would not exist. Brandon absorbed this slowly, perhaps understanding for the first time that Catherine had always been navigating a longer, more intricate course than anything he had been capable of imagining. He left without another word, his footsteps growing quieter down the hospital corridor. An hour later, Margaret returned with champagne. Non-alcoholic for Catherine, the genuine article for everyone else. Patricia raised a glass. To Catherine Chen, who demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt that the finest revenge is a life fully and honestly lived. To Elizabeth Chen, Catherine replied, who will never be asked to diminish her light to make someone else more comfortable in the dark. As they raised their glasses, Catherine's phone buzzed with a notification. Chen Technologies IPO had received formal approval. Initial valuation, $1.2 billion. She was officially a billionaire. She looked at Elizabeth, who was beginning to stir, making the small, uncertain sounds of a newborn, deciding between sleep and wakefulness. Your mama has just become a billionaire, she whispered. But what matters more is that your mama is finally free. The auditorium at the Javits Center was at capacity with 500 women, all of them entrepreneurs or aspiring to become one. The Phoenix Rising Women's Entrepreneurship After 50 conference had sold out within 3 days, with a waiting list of hundreds who could not get in. Catherine stood at the podium with Elizabeth sleeping against her chest in a carrier. Her voice was fuller now, more settled, filling the room without amplification. Behind her, a large screen displayed images from her journey. The young secretary who had married Brandon Sterling, the society wife photographed at charity events, and finally the tech billionaire on the cover of Forbes beneath the headline, The $1 Billion Secret. I spent 20 years hiding my abilities to protect a man's sense of himself, she began. The room fell into complete silence. I built an $800 million company in private because I believed that was what love demanded of me. Making yourself smaller so someone else could feel large enough. Knowing nods moved through the audience. Hundreds of women who carried similar histories, similar marks, similar ambitions that had been quietly redirected. But here is what I came to understand through my midlife transformation, Catherine continued, adjusting Elizabeth as her daughter made a soft sound. The only person responsible for maintaining a man's ego is that man. It is not our role to reduce ourselves to make others comfortable. It is not our obligation to conceal our intelligence, suppress our ambition, or perform a version of ourselves that is less than the real one. She moved to the next slide, a graph charting Chen Technologies' growth across 20 years. I began with $60,000 from my father's life insurance. Today, Chen Technologies carries a valuation of $1.2 billion, but this is not really about the number. It is about what that number represents. Freedom. The power to make decisions rooted in your own needs and values rather than someone else's demands. A hand went up in the audience. Miss Chen, where did you find the strength to keep building through all of those years of being dismissed? Catherine smiled. I had something that kept me moving. Every time Brandon dismissed me as just a housewife, every time he claimed credit for work I had quietly placed in front of him, every time he introduced me as his better half while clearly treating me as the lesser one, I knew the truth about myself, and that truth was the source of everything. She moved to the next slide, showing data on women over 50 entering entrepreneurship. Financial independence after 50 is not only possible, it is one of the most powerful things you can pursue. Women in their 50s and 60s represent the fastest growing group of new business founders. We carry experience, perspective, and if I am being direct, a complete and total absence of patience for nonsense. Laughter rolled through the space. How many of us have made ourselves smaller to protect someone else's comfort? Catherine asked. Hundreds of hands rose. How many have hidden our intelligence, our ambitions, or our financial success to manage someone else's emotions? Even more hands went up. I am 52 years old, Catherine continued. I have a 6-month-old daughter. I am single after a 20-year marriage to a man who traded me in for a 23-year-old professional con artist who subsequently emptied his accounts and disappeared. And I have never been more genuinely content or more fully alive. Applause filled every corner of the auditorium. Today, I am announcing the first round of Phoenix Fund grants, $10 million to be distributed among women over 50 who are building businesses after the end of a marriage. Because women supporting women is not a slogan, it is a movement. And midlife transformation is not a story of what you have lost. It is the story of finally becoming who you have always been. She clicked to the final slide, showing the application details. We are not searching for polished business proposals. We are looking for women who have been told they are too far along in life to start over, too overlooked, too settled, too much of a risk. We are looking for women who have been dismissed and discarded and written off, because those are the women who build empires, not despite everything they have endured, but because of it. After the talk, Catherine worked her way through the crowd, Elizabeth now awake and delighting everyone within reach with her wide, unguarded expressions. Women came to her with stories, with ideas for companies, with quiet gratitude. A woman of 60 who had been told by her ex-husband she would amount to nothing, pressed a product prototype into Catherine's hands. A 55-year-old whose husband had left her for his assistant outlined her vision for a consulting firm with steady conviction. Your story gave me something to hold on to, one woman said, her voice catching. My wealthy ex-husband told me I would be lost without him. Watching what you have built made me understand he was simply wrong. As Catherine moved toward the exit, David appeared at her side. Brandon is here. He says it concerns Elizabeth's trust fund. Catherine found Brandon in the lobby, looking genuinely out of place among the purposeful, confident energy moving through the space. He appeared steadier than he had at the hospital. His suit, though not expensive, fit him properly. He had put on a modest amount of weight. He was holding a folder and a small paper gift bag. Brandon, Catherine acknowledged. I watched your talk on the live stream, he said. You were extraordinary. Catherine waited. Compliments from Brandon had always historically preceded requests. I wanted to give you this, he said, extending the folder. It is a trust for Elizabeth, not a significant sum, $50,000. Everything I have managed to save over 6 months from my new position. I understand that, compared to what you can provide her, it is very little. But I wanted to give her something that came from me directly. Catherine opened the folder and reviewed the documents. It was properly structured. Brandon retained no access to the funds once they were deposited. This must have required real sacrifice. 6 months of it, he confirmed. I have been living in a studio. I take the subway everywhere. I cook for myself now. All the things you suggested at various points over the years that I refused to consider beneath me. He extended the small bag. Inside it was a handmade wooden toy, a rocking horse, carefully carved with visible attention. I made it myself, he said, with something close to shyness. I took a woodworking class. I wanted Elizabeth to have something from her father that had nothing to do with money. Catherine examined the toy, genuinely moved by it. In 20 years, she had never seen Brandon make anything with his hands. He had always considered physical craft beneath him. Thank you, she said simply. Elizabeth will keep this. Brandon nodded, began to go, then turned back. Catherine, that company I work for now, the Chen subsidiary, they are promoting me, not to a senior leadership role, just a senior analyst. My manager, who is 15 years younger than me, told me I am finally learning to listen rather than always needing to be the loudest voice in the room. She said I am starting to contribute rather than just seeking recognition. That is real progress, Brandon. I am also in therapy, he said, trying to understand why I needed to feel superior in order to feel like I had value, why I mistook performance for substance, why I could not recognize what I had until it was already gone. He was quiet for a moment. I am not here looking for forgiveness. I have not earned it. I only wanted you to know that I am working on becoming someone Elizabeth will not feel she needs to apologize for. Catherine shifted Elizabeth in the carrier, the baby babbling contentedly. Elizabeth will not know you as the chief executive of Sterling Industries. She will not know you through the context of our marriage. She will know you as her father. That is a beginning without any history attached to it. Do not waste it. Brandon nodded and left, his walk steadier and more grounded than it had been in some time. That evening, Catherine returned to Shaoran, the same restaurant where this story had begun, exactly 1 year after that anniversary dinner. But this time she was not alone, and she was not waiting for anyone. She sat at her usual table with Elizabeth in a high chair beside her, Margaret and Patricia across the table, David at the far end. All of them together to mark Chen Technology's successful IPO and the official launch of the Phoenix Fund. Mrs. Chen, Henri the maitre d' approached with genuine warmth. Your usual? Sparkling water for me, Henri. I am still nursing. Champagne for my friends. We are celebrating something significant tonight. As Henri moved away, Catherine lifted Elizabeth from her chair and held her close. The baby laughed, the pure, unbounded joy of a child for whom the world is still entirely new and entirely good, and reached for the necklace at her mother's throat. A simple gold chain bearing a Chinese character for strength. A gift from her father, one she had never worn during her marriage because Brandon had said it looked too ethnic. To new beginnings, Margaret raised her glass. To truth brought into daylight, Patricia added. To empires built quietly and finally claimed openly, David offered. Catherine lifted her sparkling water. To every woman who has been told she is nothing without someone, may she discover she is everything on her own. As they touched glasses, Catherine caught a glimpse of someone at the bar. Brandon, with no drink in front of him, only coffee and what appeared to be a textbook. He was studying. Perhaps for a certification that might help him advance in the work he was slowly learning to approach with humility. Their eyes met briefly across the restaurant. He raised his coffee cup in a quiet, simple acknowledgement. Then he turned back to his book. Catherine turned back toward her chosen people, her daughter, her life, which was now completely and unambiguously hers. Outside, Manhattan shimmered in the evening, full of unspent possibility. Somewhere out there, a woman in her 50s was likely sitting in a restaurant, waiting for a husband who would not come, quietly asking herself whether this was all there was left for her. Tomorrow, she might encounter Catherine's story somewhere online. She might find the Phoenix Fund. She might begin to understand that being let go after decades was not the end of her story. It was the clearing before something real could finally grow. She might recognize that financial independence after 50 was not a fantasy, that the patterns of narcissistic behavior could be survived and moved past. That transformation in the middle of a life could be the most expansive kind of all. Elizabeth reached up and pressed her small palm against her mother's cheek, then made a sound that carried the shape of the word mama. Yes, my darling, Catherine said, pressing her lips to her daughter's forehead. Mama is here, and Mama is never disappearing into the background again. The lights of the city glimmered beyond the windows like something that had always been there, waiting. Catherine Chen had spent 20 years in the margins, had raised $1 billion empire in the quiet, and had come through her divorce stronger and more wholly herself than she had ever been permitted to become. Her story was not singular because of the wealth. It was worth sharing because she chose to share it, to stand in front of other women and say, you do not have to accept what you have been handed. You can build something real. You can survive the dismissal. You can arrive at the other side of it and find yourself waiting there. Some endings, Catherine said aloud, to her friends, to the room, to every woman who had ever needed to hear it, are actually beginnings wearing a different face. And sometimes the most lasting form of success is not the kind that takes something away from someone else. It is the kind that gives something back to yourself. Freedom, honesty, the full and unedited version of who you were always meant to be. Elizabeth clapped her hands as though she understood every word, and the sound carried through the warm, candlelit room like something celebratory, like the world itself responding. Like everything, finally, arriving exactly as it should.